They threw him out into the storm, certain he wouldn't make it till morning. By midnight, the wind was already strong enough to knock a man sideways. Snow didn't fall. It moved. Sideways. Relentless. Eli Mercer was 16 and already freezing. He didn't run at first, didn't think, didn't argue. The door had closed behind him, and that was that. No coat, no blanket, no plan. Just cold, coming fast. He made it past the fence, past the barn, then the road, if it could still be called that. The tracks disappeared within minutes, covered, erased. His hands went numb first, then his face. Then the cold started moving inward. That was the dangerous part. Not when it hurt, but when it stopped hurting. The land around him was empty, white, endless. No trees thick enough to hide in, no rocks large enough to break wind. No light, no sound, except the storm. He walked until walking wasn't walking anymore, just falling forward again and again. Once he stopped. Not by choice. His legs just didn't move. He stood there in the dark, breathing air that burned going in and froze coming out. He thought about turning back, but there was no back. The storm had taken it. Everything looked the same. Every direction felt wrong. Then he saw it. Not light, not smoke. A shape, low, half buried, barely there. At first, he thought it was a drift, snow piled high against something that had long since collapsed. But it didn't move with the wind. It held. He stumbled toward it, slowly, carefully, because hope could get you killed faster than cold. The closer he got, the clearer it became. Wood, dark under the snow, a roof sunken low, walls almost swallowed by the earth. A house, or what was left of one. The door was there, half covered, frozen at the edges. He pushed. Nothing. He pushed again, harder. The wood groaned. Ice cracked. And the door gave. Warm air touched his face. Not strong, not hot, but real. Inside, it wasn't frozen. The air didn't bite, didn't burn, didn't steal breath. He stepped in, and the wind dropped away behind him. Just like that. The storm still raged outside, but inside, something was holding. And whatever had built this place had already figured out how to survive winter. The door closed behind him. and the storm was gone. Not stopped, just kept out. Eli stood there for a moment, not moving, not thinking, just feeling. Warmth, not fire, not heat that pushed, but something quieter, something that stayed. His fingers started to hurt again. That was good. Pain meant they were still his. He stepped further inside, careful, expecting the cold to follow him in. It didn't. The air was still. No wind, no draft, no thin whistles through cracks like every other house he had ever known. He looked around. The place was small, smaller than it should have been, as if the walls had been built inward, not outward. The outer structure, what he had seen outside, was larger. But inside, the room was tight, contained. A room inside a room. He reached out, touched the wall. It wasn't cold, not warm, but not freezing. It held something. He pressed harder, listened. There was space behind it, not hollow, packed, dense. Straw or wool, something thick, trapped between two layers of wood. The cold couldn't get through. He looked down. The floor was raised, not directly on the ground. Boards laid over something else. He crouched, ran his hand along the edge. Air. A gap beneath it. The cold from the ground was being held back. He stood again, turning slowly now, seeing more. The bed wasn't against the wall. It was built into the corner. Small, low ceiling above it, almost like a box. A place to trap heat. Keep it close. Keep it from rising and disappearing. And the stove was wrong. Not wrong. Different. The pipe didn't go straight up. It ran sideways first, along the wall, low, before turning and leaving the house. The smoke had to travel, give up its heat before escaping. Nothing here was wasted. Not air, not warmth, not space. Eli stepped back, looked at it all again. This wasn't a broken house. It wasn't abandoned. It was built for this. For storms like the one outside. For nights like this. Someone had lived here. Someone who knew what winter did. Someone who had planned for it. He moved to the corner, near the bed. There, half hidden, something small. Wood. Carved. Marks, lines, not decoration, not random. A record of days, of winters, of time spent inside this room. Eli ran his fingers over them. Whoever built this had stayed long enough to learn, and long enough to leave something behind for the next person who wouldn't survive without it. Eli didn't sleep. Not at first. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't trust it. Warmth in the middle of a storm felt like something that could disappear if he stopped watching it. So he stayed awake, sat near the stove, hands stretched toward it, not too close, just enough, feeling how the heat moved, not fast, not wild, slow, steady. The fire inside was small, smaller than anything he had seen used to fight a storm like this, but the room stayed warm, because the fire wasn't the point. He watched the pipe, the way it carried heat along the wall, the way the wood held it even after the flames dropped. The heat didn't leave with the smoke. It stayed behind. He looked at the walls again, pressed his hand against the wood. Still not cold. They were holding it. Everything here was made to keep warmth from escaping, not to create more. That was the difference. He added wood, carefully, not a pile, not enough to flare, just one piece. The flame rose, then settled. He waited, watched. The room didn't overheat, didn't spike. It absorbed. He moved to the bed, the small space built into the corner, climbed inside, pulled the rough blanket over himself, and for the first time since the door had closed behind him, he stopped shaking. The heat stayed there, held in that small space, not rising away, not disappearing into empty air. Trapped on purpose. He slept, not long, but deep. When he woke, the fire was low, almost gone, but the room was still warm. No one had fed it. Nothing had changed, and still the warmth remained. Because it wasn't coming from the flame anymore. It was coming from everything around him. The walls, the floor, the bed. They had taken the heat and were giving it back. Eli stood, moved slowly now, not desperate anymore, thinking. Near the stove, he found something else, wood. Next to it, another, and another. A pattern. He followed it, around the wall, each mark placed at the same height. Fire levels. How much? How often? Not instructions, not words, but guidance, left behind for someone who would need it. He adjusted, stopped feeding the fire like it was the only thing keeping him alive, started feeding it like it was part of something larger, a system. He burned less and stayed warmer. Outside, the storm didn't weaken. It grew. Wind harder, snow deeper, cold sharper. Inside, nothing changed. That was the point. And somewhere in that silence, in that steady warmth, Eli realized something he hadn't known before. He wasn't just surviving the storm. He was inside something that had already learned how to beat it. Outside, winter stopped pretending. The storm didn't pass. It settled in, like something that had decided to stay. Day 2. The wind didn't drop. It shifted. Colder. Sharper. Snow built up against every wall in the valley. Roofs groaned. Doors froze shut. Chimneys pulled harder, stealing heat faster than it could be made. People burned more. They always did. More wood, more fire, more heat for less return. The flames rose, bright, hungry, then vanished, dragged upward and out. By the third day, wood piles shrank to nothing. Fences went first, then tools, then anything that could burn, even things that shouldn't. Chairs, doors, beds. But the cold didn't care. It moved in anyway, through walls, through floors, through every gap they had never noticed before. Children stopped crying, not because they were safe, because they were too cold to make sound. Old men sat by dead fires, watching embers fade, with nothing left to feed them. The town was failing, and on the ridge, nothing failed. Snow piled high against the house, half burying it, pressing in from all sides. But that only made it stronger. The wind couldn't reach the walls. The cold couldn't move. Inside, Eli added one piece of wood. Waited. Watched. The warmth stayed. He didn't need more. He didn't need much, because the house was already holding it. While the town burned everything, he burned almost nothing, and stayed alive. By the fourth day, someone noticed. Not the system, not the house. The boy. Eli Mercer, who had been thrown out into the storm, wasn't found in the snow. He wasn't found at all. No body, no tracks, nothing. At first, they assumed the storm had taken him, like it took others, quickly, quietly. But then, someone saw something. Not clearly, not fully. A shape on the ridge, half buried, not moving, but still there. And near it, no drifting, no shifting snow, as if something was breaking the wind. Another man saw it the next day, from farther down. The same shape, the same stillness. Not natural, not random. By the 5th day, they started talking. Not loudly, not openly, but enough. He didn't die. He found something. By the 6th day, talk wasn't enough. The cold was winning, and whatever was on that ridge wasn't losing. They stopped arguing, stopped guessing, stopped pretending they could outlast it. On the 7th day, they chose. Not pride, not certainty. Survival. They would go into the storm and follow the path of the boy they had thrown away. Because he was still alive, and they were not. They came on the 7th day. Not as a group, but as what was left. Men who had stopped speaking, women who had nothing left to carry, children wrapped in whatever cloth hadn't been burned yet. They followed the ridge, step by step, into wind that still tried to turn them back. But something was different. The closer they got, the less the wind moved. Not gone, just broken. Then they saw it, the house, half buried, lower than the land around it, as if it had chosen not to stand against the storm, but sink beneath it. No smoke, no light, nothing that should mean life. But the snow didn't drift the way it did everywhere else. It settled, held, like something was stopping it. They reached the door, frozen at the edges. One of the men, what strength he had left, pushed. The wood cracked. Ice broke loose, and the door opened. Warm air met them. Not a blast, not a fire. A presence. Something that had been there long before they arrived, and would stay long after. They stepped inside, one by one, careful, as if they might lose it if they moved too fast. Then faster. When they felt it, the cold left them. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to breathe. Eli stood near the stove, watching, not hiding, not angry, just there. The boy they had thrown into the storm was the one holding the door open. No one spoke at first. They didn't need to. The room said everything. The walls, thick, holding heat. The air, still, unmoving. The fire, small, controlled. Nothing wasted, nothing lost. They moved deeper inside, hands against the walls, feeling it, trying to understand what they had missed. Some sat, some just stood, letting the warmth return to them. No one asked how he had survived. They already knew. He hadn't fought the storm. He had stepped inside something that didn't need to. They stayed through the rest of the cold. Days that felt like weeks. No one burned more than they had to. No one wasted what little they had left. They learned. Not from words, from the walls. From the way the house held. When the storm finally broke, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like being allowed to live. They stepped back outside, into a world that had changed, not because the cold was gone, but because they understood it now. They looked at the house, still there, still quiet, still holding. Someone had built it long before them, for a winter they might never see, and left it not for themselves, but for whoever came next. Because out here, survival wasn't about burning more. It was about losing less. And sometimes, the only thing that keeps you alive in winter is something someone else understood before you ever needed it.